Imagine this. You're Will Guidara. You're the general manager of 11 Madison Park. You've got 4 stars in the New York Times. You've won a bunch of James Beard Awards. I mean, by any measure, you are a world-class success.
You're at the top of your game, or so you think.
Exactly. So you fly to London with your chef partner, Daniel Hum, for the 2010 World's 50 Best Restaurants Awards. You're in a room surrounded by your heroes, literal legends of the culinary world.
The energy in that room must have been incredible.
Countdown begins, and then really early in the evening, they start announcing the bottom of the list. And your name is called first.
Number 50. Dead last.
Dead last. And the humiliation, it doesn't stop there. The cameras, they instantly zoom in on your faces.
Oh, no.
And your genuine, heartbroken, just gut-punched expressions are projected onto this massive 30-foot screen for the entire room to see.
So all of your heroes, people like Massimo Bottura, are watching your devastation in real time. Wow. That is a soul-crushing moment.
To put it mildly. But that moment, that public failure, was the exact catalyst for a radical, a completely revolutionary shift in how they ran their entire business.
It's the classic rock-bottom moment that sparks a huge change.
Exactly. And that moment on that 30-foot screen is where the concept we're deep diving into today was really born. Unreasonable hospitality. We're going to go way beyond just, basic service competence.
Right.
We're exploring a whole business philosophy that's centered on maximizing human connection, on exceeding expectations, and committing to excellence in ways that, frankly, most traditional businesses would call, well, completely irrational.
Or unreasonable. And for this deep dive, we're pulling our insights from the book Unreasonable Hospitality. And welcome to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Please subscribe to hear new book summaries.
This book, it meticulously chronicles the incredible 11-year journey of 11 Madison Park, or EMP as we'll call it.
It details how they went from a solid, respectable, but ultimately kind of forgettable 2-star brasserie to earning the definitive title of the world's #1 restaurant in 2017.
And the central insight, the big takeaway, is that this massive leap wasn't just about culinary innovation. It wasn't just about the food.
No, not at all. It was about a total dedication, an intense, intentional focus on how people felt during their experience. The whole philosophy is laid out in the book.
So our mission today isn't just to, recap the story. We want to extract the core actionable strategies from this narrative.
We're looking for the operating manual for emotional connection.
Yes. We want to find those aha moments that show how embracing the unreasonable can translate into real excellence and profound customer loyalty, whether you run a fine dining restaurant, a law firm, or a tech startup.
Before we jump into the strategy itself, let's just go back to that moment of failure for a second. It's so important because it gives you the context for the sheer level of ambition they had to find.
Right. They had all the domestic awards, James Beard stuff, the New York Times stars. They're comfortable.
Comfortable, but maybe. Provincially famous. They go to London and realize they're playing in a whole different league.
A completely different ballgame. They saw that the elite chefs, the real top tier, they weren't just cooking. They were leading culinary revolutions.
So that night, after the ceremony, after the humiliation, they skip the main party. They grab a bottle of bourbon and sit outside their hotel.
And right there, that bottle of bourbon becomes the birthplace of their new ambition. While they're drowning their sorrows, Will Guidara and Daniel Hum, they grab a cocktail napkin.
A cocktail napkin, of all things.
And on that napkin, they scribble down this just insane, high-stakes goal.
We will be #1 in the world.
Just like that. They realized that trying to follow the path of their heroes, Ferran Adria at El Bulli with molecular gastronomy, or René Redzepi at Noma with foraged foods,
that it wasn't sustainable for them. That ground was already taken. That kind of innovation was already cornered by these giants.
They needed a non-culinary edge. They figured, food fads come and go, but there's one fundamental human desire that never, ever fades.
The deep longing to be cared for. To feel respected, to feel like you belong somewhere.
Exactly. Hum's food was already incredible, but their path to absolute global greatness, that would be paved with a passionate, singular focus on graciousness and connection.
And with that realization, that clarity, they smoothed out the bourbon-stained napkin.
And added 2 more words. Unreasonable hospitality.
And that phrase, born out of failure and exhaustion in bourbon, it becomes their call to arms. It perfectly captures this crucial distinction that separates most competent businesses from the truly great ones.
Which is the difference between service and hospitality.
Exactly. I love the definition that one potential employee, who they didn't even end up hiring, gave them.
Oh, which one was that?
He said, service is black and white. Hospitality is color.
That's brilliant. It's so simple.
It is. Service is the functional part. It's competence, efficiency, execution. It's getting the reservation right, making sure the food is hot, delivering the check accurately. That's the black and white checklist.
But hospitality, that's the emotional part. That's the color. It's the genuine engagement, the authentic connection. It's the intentional effort to make people feel great about their experience.
And they fully embraced the word unreasonable. They leaned into it precisely because it was the word people always use to shut down radical ideas.
Right. That's unreasonable. We can't do that. By turning it into a goal, they made it their North Star.
It's so true. I mean, no one who has ever fundamentally changed an industry did it by being cautious or reasonable. Think about Walt Disney's vision for a theme park, or Steve Jobs' obsession with design purity.
Yeah, that's a great point. The best chefs were already unreasonable about their ingredients, about their technique.
So EMP decided they would be unreasonable about how they made people feel.
So that brings us to, okay, how do you build this? You can't just tell your team, hey, go be unreasonable and expect magic to happen.
Right. It has to be built on a foundation. And for Guidara, that philosophy started with some really deep personal roots. The nobility of service, the power of being intentional, and navigating all the operational conflicts that come up.
His connection to the industry was, you could say, inherited. Both his parents worked in it. His dad was an executive at Ground Round, and his mom was a stewardess and worked in airline catering.
But the real magic of hospitality, the thing that hooked him, that happened during his 12th birthday dinner at the iconic Four Seasons restaurant in New York.
And it wasn't really the food that stuck with him most, was it? It was the feeling, the atmosphere.
Exactly. The elegance, the history, the choreography of the staff moving through the room. He realized the restaurant could be more than just a place to eat. It could create this profound, almost cinematic memory. He knew right then that's what he wanted to do with his life.
But the core lesson, that Maya Angelou quote, people will never forget how you made them feel, that came from a much deeper and honestly more painful emotional place.
It came from his mother's decades-long battle with a debilitating illness.
His mother was diagnosed with brain cancer when he was just 4, and the surgery and radiation left her partially paralyzed. She couldn't use her left side at all.
But despite that incredible physical challenge, she showed up. Every day, she'd drive him to tennis practice and just wait in the car for 90 minutes in the cold New York winter, just to be there.
And as the illness progressed, she eventually became quadriplegic. She lost her ability to speak. And yet, every single day, she would have her home health aide push her wheelchair down to the end of their road just to wait for him to come home from school.
Think about that for a second. That act of persistent, silent commitment. She couldn't speak, she couldn't hug him, but she was there, waiting with this huge smile.
And that's what taught him firsthand the immense non-transactional value of feeling truly and persistently welcomed. She was overcoming these insane physical barriers just to offer a simple human connection.
And that foundational belief was just cemented after her death, which happened right after he graduated from college.
Yeah, in his grief, his father basically pushed him to keep his commitment to do an internship in Spain. But first, they just desperately needed an oasis, as he puts it, some kind of respite.
So Guidara, on a whim, he emails Chef Daniel Boulud and asks if he can bring his heartbroken father to the restaurant for some comfort.
And Boulud and his staff, they delivered an experience that was the absolute definition of non-transactional care.
It was 4 hours. 4 hours of just exquisite respite during their deepest grief. The chef was personally detailing every course over the intercom for them. There was no rush.
Then when they finished, they were literally the last 2 people in the entire restaurant.
And then the check.
Yeah.
It never came. Boulud and his team had given them a gift.
And Guidara talks about watching the crushing weight of years of pain and exhaustion just lift from his father's face during that meal. And that's what taught him that service, when it's done with nobility, is so much more than a transaction.
It can be a profound, essential act. It can provide comfort and restoration when people are going through the darkest times.
And this idea of nobility was complemented by this fiercely intentional approach to life, which he got from his father.
His dad worked these brutal 15-hour days, but he meticulously planned his entire day around caring for his wife.
Right. He'd wake up super early to help her shower and dress and eat before he went to work, and then he'd reverse that whole painstaking process when he got home late at night.
And that level of stamina, that selflessness, it wasn't random. It was only possible through precise intentionality. He was mapping out every hour, prioritizing relentlessly, never wavering from the things that really mattered.
And Guidara realized that intentionality isn't some, abstract business buzzword. It's a requirement. If you want a specific outcome, every single decision, even the most mundane stuff, has to be done with a clear purpose, with an eye on that goal.
He even applied it to his teenage goals. He wanted to study at Cornell, open his own restaurant in New York City, and marry Cindy Crawford.
Well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad.
Exactly. But he systematically pursued all of them. And once he got into the operational world, he immediately ran into this tension between 2 different ways of running a company.
Restaurant smart and corporate smart. It's a distinction his father taught him.
Yeah, and the defining difference is all about where the organization puts its highest paid, most respected people. Are they in the restaurants themselves, close to the guest? That's restaurant smart.
Or are they in the corporate offices, managing from afar? That's corporate smart.
Right. Restaurant smart companies, they prioritize autonomy, creative freedom for the on-the-ground team. It leads to better hospitality, more nimble responses, a greater sense of ownership.
But they often lack the scalable back-end systems, the controls for accounting, HR, standardization.
Whereas corporate smart companies have those robust systems down cold. They're profitable, efficient, scalable, but those very controls can stifle the human connection and the creative spontaneity that defines real hospitality.
So the massive challenge that Guidara and Hum took on was trying to run a company that was brilliantly both.
It's a beautiful idea. But where did that tension actually show up in the day-to-day?
Well, he saw it firsthand when he took a job as an assistant purchaser and controller for the restaurants in the MetLife building. A total back office, basement job, the heart of corporate smart control.
And the first story that really shows this tension is the vase incident. It seems so small.
So small. He's helping out behind the bar one day, and he notices this big, mandated floral display is blocking the bartender's ability to make eye contact with guests.
And eye contact is like hospitality 101. It's fundamental.
Totally. So he makes a sensible, restaurant smart move. He just relocates the vase to the other side of the bar where it conveniently hides the messy service area. Win-win.
Until it wasn't.
Right. 2 days later, the vase is back in its original obstructive spot. Arts and design from corporate had mandated its placement, and that mandate overruled the actual needs of the people serving the guests.
What's the business lesson there for people listening?
It shows that if you let it go unchecked, corporate control dictated by people who are far removed from the actual customer experience can absolutely strangle on the ground creativity and human connection, even over something as small as a vase.
The system prioritized a certain aesthetic over actual function and connection.
Exactly. And the second, more painful incident involved a server named Felix. This really gets to the core of culture versus systems.
Felix was one of those guys. Super talented, charismatic, the regulars loved him. But he was also notoriously unreliable and deeply disrespectful to his coworkers. A classic culture killer.
So Guidara fires him on the spot after Felix rolls in 2 hours late without calling, and then scoffs at his manager, saying, "I don't need to explain that to you."
That's a clear, decisive, restaurant smart move. You have to protect the team's morale, protect the culture.
But then the corporate smart system kicks in.
Human resources.
Bingo. HR, the system designed to ensure fairness and consistency, they rehire Felix without even consulting Guidara, the on-site manager. Because Felix was popular and a long-standing employee, and by corporate standards, the infraction wasn't serious enough.
And the outcome of that is just devastating for a leader. The system completely eroded his trust and authority. He felt disempowered.
He was forced to manage a vision that undermined his authority and damaged the very culture he was trying to build.
The lesson there is just so clear. If you say you put your employees first, that has to include your managers. The collateral damage a talented but toxic employee like Felix causes is just too high to tolerate, no matter what your HR policies say.
The systems have to support, not override, good judgment when it comes to culture.
So once Guidara and Hum really committed to this and started running EMP together, they had to figure out how to operationalize this philosophy, how to merge that restaurant smart warmth with corporate smart systems.
And this is where they started building that culture of operational excellence.
They borrowed heavily from the foundational text of their industry at the time. Danny Meyer's setting the table, and the whole philosophy of enlightened hospitality. The main goal was to train employees to be proactive, to always be looking for small ways to make the experience seamless.
And this systematic approach led them to the idea of the grace note, a systemized surprise that enhances the emotional experience without being, part of the core service.
The parking meter story is the most famous example of this.
So a guest mentions they have to run out and feed the meter in the middle of their meal. The natural, hospitable thing to do is offer to do it for them. But how do you scale that? How do you make that a system instead of just relying on one person's heroism?
You systemize the unexpected. So they added a question to the reservation confirmation process. They just asked guests how they were arriving if they said they were driving and parking at a street meter.
A server was quietly dispatched to run outside and drop a couple of quarters in the box.
And the genius of it isn't the money. It's 50 cents. Who cares? The genius is that it was an act performed outside the expected boundary of the restaurant.
Right. It had nothing to do with the meal itself, but because it was so thoughtful and attentive to the guest's life outside the building, it just completely blew their minds.
For anyone listening who doesn't run a restaurant, how could they apply that idea?
Okay, so say you run a financial planning firm. Your service, the black and white, is managing investments, filing taxes correctly. A grace note might be a follow-up email, not about investments, but with a personalized summary of new tax deductions that apply specifically to that client's unique family situation.
Or sending a quick personalized analysis of a market event you had a casual conversation about last week. It's an act of care that goes beyond the paid scope of work.
Exactly. And a huge part of this operational shift was leadership. Randy Grudy, who was the GM at Tabla and later became the CEO of Shake Shack, he taught Guidara a foundational lesson.
His belief was, all it takes for something extraordinary to happen is one person with enthusiasm.
And Randy brought this intense energy. His pre-meal meetings weren't just dry recitations of the daily specials. They were like locker room speeches designed to inspire that emotional labor.
Guidara learned from him that you, as the leader, have to let your energy impact the team, rather than letting their exhaustion or frustration impact you.
And crucially, Randy instilled this profound sense of ownership. Guidara tells the story about him just tossing the front door keys to a 22-year-old manager and saying, "You okay if I get out of here a little early?"
And that trust, that simple act, it makes employees work exponentially harder when the boss is gone, because they feel like they are truly in charge.
When Guidara first got to EMP, though, the culture was a mess. It was completely fractured, a battlefield between two factions.
Yeah, the friendly, relaxed old guard on one side and the hyper-precise, formal, fine dining squad on the other.
And it led to this crippling inconsistency. Like you'd have two different managers correct the same server on how to carry a tray, just 10 feet apart from each other.
It's chaos. Guidara realized he couldn't just fire everyone or mandate one style. He had to find the inherent value in the people he already had.
This led him to his hidden treasures principle, which actually came from a story his father told him about leading a unit in Vietnam.
The lesson from his dad was that a leader's primary job is to find the buried natural strengths of the people on their team, which might have nothing to do with their actual job title.
The star example of this is a guy named Eleazar Cervantes.
Initially, Eleazar was a truly terrible food runner. He just didn't care about the details of the food, the nuances of balsamic vinegar aging or where the sea salt came from. Managers were always complaining he was disengaged.
But Guidara watched him closely, and he realized Eleazar wasn't disorganized at all. He was hyper-organized, and he had these genuine natural leadership qualities. He just hated the repetitive, descriptive parts of food service.
So he promoted him to expediter, which for anyone who doesn't know, the expediter is basically the air traffic controller in the kitchen. A super high-pressure role coordinating everything between the front and back of house.
And Eleazar's genius for organization and coordination just shone immediately. He became absolutely essential to the restaurant's entire flow, a linchpin of their success.
The lesson there for any manager is huge. Your job often isn't to reprimand or fire people for being bad at one specific task, but to stop trying to fit square pegs into round holes.
Right, and instead identify the hidden role where their innate strengths will make them shine.
To make people feel safe enough to shine, Guidara mandated consistency in leadership. He said a manager can be tough, but the employees have to know what version of the manager they're going to get every single day.
He even codified his feedback principles, pulling from books like The 1-Minute Manager.
The rules are classics, but they work. Criticize the behavior, not the person. Praise in public, criticize in private. and deliver praise with real, palpable emotion, but deliver criticism dispassionately, focused only on the facts.
He internalized that no public criticism rule after this really painful personal experience. He was working a summer job at Spago. He dropped a stack of plates.
And the chef de cuisine just screamed at him in front of the entire dining room, completely humiliated him. And he vowed he would never, ever inflict that kind of public shame on one of his own team members.
And that commitment to his team, it extended to modeling excellence. Guidara brought back the practice of pre-meal lineup notes, the daily briefing for the staff.
But instead of just a rough printout, he meticulously designed the template. He was obsessive about it.
He insisted the notes be beautiful as well as clear and well-organized. Why? Why that level of detail for an internal document?
Because that's unreasonable detail in action. The goal was to treat the staff as the very first recipients of hospitality. If the lineup notes were as beautifully presented as, say, the lavender honey-glazed duck,
it sets an implicit standard. It tells the staff, we care about you and we care about every single detail you touch, because the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Let's talk about how this intense, meticulous attention to detail really fueled their pursuit of excellence, and how they balanced those rigorous standards financially with the spontaneity of the unreasonable philosophy.
Guidara admits he's a perfectionist. He's the guy who's always readjusting a slightly crooked picture, remaking the bed, constantly straightening things.
And he realized that this fussiness, which can be tedious in your personal life, is actually a superpower in the organized chaos of a restaurant.
He understood that since any human-powered organization can't achieve literal perfection, the goal has to be relentless excellence, just maximizing the number of details you get right.
It's very similar to Sir David Brailsford's famous success with British cycling, the aggregation of marginal gains, where these tiny 1% improvements across hundreds of different areas lead to a massive overall increase in performance.
And this pursuit of excellence, it extended to details that are almost invisible to the guest. For example, ensuring the delicate Riedel logo on every single wine glass was aligned precisely with the edge of the table.
Or, even more mind-boggling, placing the manufacturer's mark, the little Limoges stamp, on the bottom of every plate so that it faced up. Meaning, if a guest was curious and flipped the plate over, they could read the stamp.
Okay, I have to push back on that one. That is truly unreasonable. Why spend time and effort on a detail that no guest is ever intended to see? Isn't that just operational waste?
It seems like waste, but the purpose is purely internal. It's a conditioning tool. The internal mantra was, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
So if you force a server to be laser focused on the alignment of a logo or a hidden stamp, you're conditioning them to apply that same level of intensity and concentration to everything else.
Exactly. To the timing of the next course, to the language they use, to their attentiveness, to the guest's needs. It contributes to the overall feeling of serenity, even if the guest can't quite put their finger on why.
Beyond the tabletop, they also mastered operational choreography. They created these imperceptible traffic patterns for the staff one-way corridors, invisible stop signs, so that the service felt like ballet, not football.
That lack of visual chaos is essential for a guest to feel serene.
And then there was the famous water sign language, which was an innovation born directly from trying to solve the small but really irritating speed bump in the service flow.
Right. The initial service was often too slow. The captain would ask for water preference, still or sparkling, then have to go find the server, who would then go get the right bottle. It took too long.
They wanted water service to be instantaneous upon seating, so their solution was a silent language.
The captain, standing behind the guest, would use these discreet hand gestures directed at the server across the room. A little wiggle of the fingers for sparkling water, a straight hand chop for still water.
The gesture was quick, totally invisible to the guest, and the server, who was already watching the tables, could immediately grab the correct bottle without the captain ever having to say a word.
It shaved critical seconds off the start of the meal, and it set the pace for this unobtrusive, excellent service.
Now, this level of precision requires extreme control over, let's say, 95% of the budget. But to afford the unreasonable touches, they needed freedom for extravagance.
And this leads us to the strategic masterpiece they called the Rule of 955.
This is the operating principle for balancing that corporate smart efficiency with restaurant smart generosity. You manage 95% of the business down to the absolute penny. You're aggressive about efficiency, minimizing waste.
But you spend the last 5% foolishly, or rather, strategically and unexpectedly.
I'm going to challenge the word foolishly. How do you justify that kind of extravagance to, say, the accounting department?
Because that 5% is psychologically the smartest money you'll ever spend. It has this outsized, memorable impact on the customer experience and on the team's morale. The ROI isn't financial, it's emotional.
Give us the example of how they applied this to the wine program.
So in the wine pairings, instead of evenly distributing the budget across 8 courses, they'd make slight economies on 5 or 6 of the courses. They'd choose excellent but slightly less expensive wines.
And this would free up capital to splurge on one really special, rare, and expensive glass, like a Grand Cru Burgundy, at the very end of the meal.
And the guest walks away remembering that incredibly luxurious, expensive surprise, not just the steady competence of the rest of the pairing. The memory of that one $200 glass totally eclipses the memory of the $50 glasses.
This principle is so transferable. If you run a big software company, you manage 95% of your cloud computing, and HR costs super tightly. But that 5% should be spent on surprising the user.
Maybe it's not spending $50,000 on a marketing campaign, but spending $5,000 on individualized, stunningly designed thank you kits that you deliver by mail. Or buying one key feature that is just wildly over-engineered and unexpected for a free tier user.
It's strategic extravagance, and it's all focused on memorability.
Another key operational innovation was tackling the problem of siloed expertise. The wine director, John Reagan, was one of the world's best. But even he couldn't be an expert in the explosion of modern beverages, craft beer, specialty coffee, cocktails.
So the strategy was brilliant. They just empowered passionate team members to take ownership of these other programs. They tapped into the passions that already existed internally and ran this distributed leadership model for beverages.
So who did they find to lead the coffee program?
They found a guy named Jim Betts, who Guidara describes as an unrepentant coffee geek. Jim had been complaining about the coffee service, calling it a just fine bulk-ordered afterthought, after he had a similar mediocre experience at the otherwise spectacular restaurant, per se.
He understood that a bad cup of coffee is the very last thing the guest tastes, and it can totally negate the 4 hours of brilliance that came before it.
So Jim was empowered to fix it, and he transformed the experience. He immediately changed suppliers, and he elevated the service from just functional to theatrical.
He introduced tableside preparation using these elaborate Chemex pour-overs and vacuum pot siphon systems. Suddenly, coffee became an elevated course, a spectacle, a moment of connection, instead of just an afterthought.
And then there was Leo Robichek, a bartender who was putting himself through medical school and was this outspoken, sometimes disruptive, internal critic of the cocktail program.
But once they gave him the keys, gave him the autonomy to design the program himself, he transformed. He shifted instantly from being a critical outsider to an ambitious, dedicated ambassador for the program. He eventually became a world-class mixologist.
And the result was this win-win-win. John Reagan improved the wine program by focusing solely on it. The other beverage programs became best in class because they were run by true specialists. And crucially, the employees gained immense ownership. They felt trusted, respected, and essential.
And this collaborative culture, it extended to intellectual curiosity, too. They started using happy hour meetings and Saturday pre-meals for non-managerial staff to present on topics of their choice.
Not just menu items, but things like the history of Madison Square Park, which led to this incredible team tour led by a Columbia professor. And it improved public speaking skills, education, and inspiration across the whole team.
Let's shift to how they applied this whole philosophy to the actual customer interaction, specifically getting rid of anything that felt transactional.
Right. Unreasonable hospitality demands what they called a transactional audit. They started eliminating any physical reminders that the guest was in a business and not a comfortable home.
So they got rid of the micros terminals, the computers, and the big physical front door podium.
Removing the podium was huge. It dismantled the psychological barrier between the maitre d' and the guest. Normally, the maitre d' hides behind that stand, stares at a screen, and just barks a command. You can take them to table 23.
It's so transactional and impersonal. Their new method was intensely relational and proactive.
The maitre d's would confirm reservations days in advance, learning subtle details about the guests. And then they'd Google the guests to find a photo so they could recognize them by name the moment they walked in the door.
So they could perform this proactive, personalized welcome. Instead of name for the reservation, it was, "Miss Sunyan, my name is Justin. We spoke on the phone the other day. We're so excited to have you with us tonight."
That simple human gesture just immediately moves the interaction from a transaction checking a name off a list to a genuine relational welcome. It makes the often intimidating experience of walking into a 4-star restaurant immediately warm.
They also attacked the final transactional pain point, the bill. The check delivery is always so fraught. If you wait too long, the guest feels ignored. If you bring it too early, they feel rushed.
Their solution was pure hospitality. Instead of the typical process, the staff delivered the check along with an entire complimentary bottle of expensive cognac.
The server would pour a small splash for everyone, place the full bottle on the table, and say, "Please help yourself to as much as you like with our compliments. And whenever you are ready, your check is right here."
It's just brilliant. The gift creates this feeling of abundance and luxury. You feel completely unrushed, even though the check is physically right there. You can't possibly feel like they're trying to push you out the door.
And that's 955 in practice. Because very few people, after a huge 15-course meal, are going to drink more than that initial splash of cognac. So the actual cost of that complimentary bottle is negligible, since it can be reused multiple times. But the feeling it generates is priceless and highly memorable.
This whole philosophy really comes alive when we start talking about the legends, the improvisational hospitality moments, these bespoke, unforgettable experiences that they created not just for VIPs, but for anyone who gave the staff an opening.
The most famous legend, of course, is the hot dog story. And it began with simple eavesdropping. Guidara was bussing a nearby table, and he overheard 4 European guests saying they regretted not having a real New York street hot dog, a dirty water dog, during their entire trip.
And Guidara didn't even hesitate. He dropped his plates, ran outside to the Sabritz cart on the corner, and bought a $2 hot dog.
And then Daniel Hum's Kitchen received this $2 hot dog and treated it like it was a $200 piece of A5 Wagyu.
Hum's team cut it into 4 elegant pieces and plated it with artistic perfection, with these precise swooshes of relish, ketchup, and mustard. The staff then presented it to the guests as a surprise amuse-bouche.
And the guests just erupted. They told Guidara it wasn't just the highlight of their meal, it was the highlight of their entire trip to New York.
A $2 hot dog, plated beautifully, became a core legend of the restaurant.
The lesson is just so profound. They didn't need huge budgets, they just needed to pay attention. The staff had to be tuned in, listening for those little conversational clues.
But I have to ask again, for a business that's so focused on operational efficiency, isn't that hot dog run a chaotic anomaly? If you spend 5 minutes running out for a hot dog, aren't you taking staff away from that 95% efficiency you need for the rest of the dining room? How do you possibly scale that kind of chaos?
That's where the Dreamweaver program comes in. The goal became proactive improvisational hospitality. They started systemizing the unexpected through pattern recognition.
They realized that while the specific needs were always unique, a hot dog, a forgotten souvenir, the types of requests often recurred. This allowed them to create a kind of toolkit for these recurring patterns.
The most scalable example was the morning rescue kit. They noticed that guests would often joke about overdoing it with the wine the night before and anticipating a hangover.
So whenever a guest mentioned this out loud, the staff would quietly prepare a bag.
And the rescue kit had strong ground coffee, some Alka-Seltzer tablets, and a muffin. And it was ready to hand out as the guests left the next morning. It was an inexpensive, personalized gift that showed the staff had heard them and actually cared about their well-being outside the restaurant walls.
Let's think about how to apply this to other businesses. A real estate agent, instead of giving the generic bottle of wine to a new couple moving in, could notice the couple is expecting a baby and proactively deliver a bag of those protective plastic outlet covers with a note saying, "One less thing for you to worry about."
Or a car salesperson who notices a nervous parent buying a first car for their teenager could skip the dealership keychain and just buy them a year's membership to AAA.
These are all inexpensive gifts, but they demonstrate that the business saw a specific, non-transactional need and cared enough to address it.
But the final key lesson here is that when you push the boundaries of unreasonable, you will sometimes go too far. And this led to a necessary and very public course correction for them.
They introduced a New York-inspired menu revamp that involved these highly elaborate scripted presentations. They had carrot tartare, a magic trick, pretzels made with local picnic ale. They were performing, not connecting.
And the critical moment came in 2012 with Pete Wells's A Critic's Notebook review in the New York Times. And he called the meal inauthentic and overly theatrical.
And Guidara realized he'd made 2 major mistakes.
The first mistake was pushing too far creatively, which he didn't actually regret. You have to explore the outer perimeter to know where the line is. They fixed this by simplifying, keeping the really popular things like the magic trick, but stripping away all the excess flourishes.
But the second, more serious mistake was insisting that the staff deliver this rigid, detailed spiel for every course. He had turned his highly relational staff into rehearsed performers, and it ruined any chance for genuine connection and dialogue with the guests.
Wills felt it was inauthentic because it was a monologue, not hospitality.
So the fix was immediate, and it was focused on trust. Trusting the staff to communicate naturally, prioritizing dialogue over the monologue, and using that critic's warning shot to filter their creative ideas.
They had another massive course correction later, around 2015, 2016, after they started sliding backward on the 50 best list. Despite being technically excellent, something just wasn't working.
Guidara analyzed a recent 15-course meal, and he discovered this shocking statistic.
They were causing 90 potential interruptions over the course of the meal. All the settings, serving, describing, clearing crumbs, water refills, wine pours, all the check-ins. 90 interruptions in 3 hours.
Their stated goal was to create a space where guests could connect with each other, and yet the staff was constantly interrupting that very connection.
That realization forced a massive simplification. They committed to serving only what they themselves would truly want to receive as guests.
And this brought them right back to their core identity. They posted a simplified, clear mission statement above the time clock for everyone to see every day.
To be the most delicious and gracious restaurant in the world, that's it. Graciousness and deliciousness were the non-negotiables.
And that clarity allowed them to move away from all the complexity. They took the radical step of eliminating the menu entirely. The meal became a true dialogue about guest preferences, sort of like the old-school Italian restaurant Rouse, which famously just serves what it wants based on its relationship with the diner.
It was a statement of trust and relationship.
And finally, after years of ambition, brutal course correction, and this relentless focus on unreasonable hospitality, the climax arrived in 2017.
At the 50 Best Awards in Melbourne, Guidara and Hum are waiting. They're nervous, but quietly confident this time. The list is counted down. And when Osteria Francescana, Massimo Bottura's place, is announced at number 2, they knew.
They knew they had won. 11 Madison Park was named the world's #1 restaurant.
And the victory wasn't just attributed to Daniel Hum's extraordinary culinary skill. It was attributed to their collective focus on unreasonable hospitality. They had succeeded by embracing the tension between two seemingly conflicting goals:
Operational excellence and pure human graciousness.
Now, the journey to number 1 wasn't without its leadership challenges, especially when they were trying to scale. When they opened the Nomad Hotel, Guidara made the classic scaling mistake.
He refused to name a new general manager at EMP because deep down he thought he was irreplaceable.
It created all this ambiguity, and it really hurt morale. And the crucial intervention came from a longtime captain, Cheryl Hefner, who had the courage to confront him.
She asked him, point blank, "Do you honestly not believe that a single person on our team is up to the task?"
And that question just forced Guidara to face his own failure of trust and his own ego. He apologized publicly to the entire EMP team. He admitted his mistake, which paradoxically ended up strengthening the bonds and building trust.
He realized that this idea that you as a leader are not going to make any errors is it's criminally stupid, as he says. Humility is essential.
And that humility reinforced his growth mindset, the importance of promoting people before they are completely ready. He promoted a former kitchen server named Kirk to be the GM, knowing that the hunger and the desire to prove that decision right would ensure Kirk worked harder than anyone else.
Ultimately, the most painful leadership decision came years later with the split between Guidara and Hum, and the agonizing decision to walk away from EMP to allow the company to stay intact even without him was guided by his father's advice.
Which was, ask yourself what right looks like, then do that, no matter how hard it is in the short term.
So if you're listening right now, regardless of your industry, software, services, manufacturing, what are the most resonant strategies that you can apply immediately from this deep dive into unreasonable hospitality?
I think first you have to solidify the difference between service, which is competence, and hospitality, which is connection. Competence is just the price of entry. Connection is the only path to the top.
2, embrace the rule of 95%. Manage that 95% down to the penny for efficiency, but spend that strategic, foolish 5% on the small extravagances that have that outsized psychological impact on memorability.
3, you have to intentionally create friction by embracing conflicting goals. Pursue operational excellence and human connection, even when they seem to clash. Because that tension is what forces true innovation, like the water sign language.
And finally, the transformative power is in personalization. You have to build a Dreamweaver program for your business. Eliminate anything that feels transactional and replace it with bespoke, authentic attention. Their perception of you is your reality.
You just can't thrive in today's world by being merely competent or reasonable. You have to choose to be in the hospitality economy where the emotional return on investment dictates your success.
So the final thought for you to take away is this. How can you use the principle of their perception is our reality to innovate in your own field, even if it means being completely unreasonable? What single, small, inexpensive, personalized, wildly unexpected hot dog can you deliver to your key customer today that they will talk about for the rest of their lives? That's the challenge Guidara and Helm proved is worth accepting. Think on that.